that? Or
No,
you?
you just look at me.
Okay.
And if we're ready? Ready? Go ahead. Okay. My name is Charlie Henson. Today we're at the 12th Armored Museum in Abilene, Texas. It's October the 5th, October the 5th, 2001. I'm talking to Edwin Golden. My name is Charlie Henson. I appreciate, Ed, you talking to us today. What I'd first like to know is your name and where you're from and your date of birth.
Yeah, Ed Golden, and I was born in Providence, Rhode Island. My parents from Ireland, and I was born September the 5th, 1925.
Did you have brothers and sisters in your family?
Yes, I had a brother and a sister that died, 3 of us.
Did your brother serve in?
Yes, my brother was in the Navy, went in the service a year or so before me, and served in the Navy in the Atlantic the whole war. And my father was in World War I. When he came here from Ireland, went right into the service in World War I in the Navy.
He served where? Where did he?
In the Navy, in the States though, you know, yeah. So we had 2 from the Navy and myself in the Army.
So basically, you came from kind of a military family?
Well, I wouldn't say military, but yes, let's say we all had something to do with the service of 2 wars. So.
Tell me your age and what got you your experiences. You were a replacement, so from the time. Tell me about Pearl Harbor Day and kind of bring us through history-wise.
Yeah, in 1941, I was in high school, and I was 16 and didn't think I'd ever be in the service. But 2 years later, when we hit 18, because all of us ended up in the service, and I was just out of high school and went right into the Army, and went to Fort McClellan, Alabama, and then we went overseas and were assigned to different divisions, and I happened to be assigned to the 12th Armored Division.
Let's go back to basic training.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go back in there, kind of your experiences, anybody you remembered, anything specific about your training?
Well, this was Fort McClellan, Alabama, and there was some of the fellows who were from high school with me. All of us were 18 years old, and went through the regular basic training and so on for infantry. And then, of course, we went, I remember going overseas on the Queen Mary, I believe it was 20,000 of us going over. That was right at the bulge, and they needed replacements for all the divisions. And I remember going into Glasgow, Scotland, because of submarines that might hit a big ship like that. And then we were immediately taken to Southampton, England, and right over to Le Havre, France, and right from about there, a replacement depot, we were just assigned to all the different divisions. And I remember being told that I was going to be in a tank division and saying, gee, I never saw a tank. They said, well, you'll see one soon. And so I didn't end up in a tank. I ended up in a half-track infantry and foot soldier and so on, you know. So then, from then, in the early part of January until the end of the war in Europe, I was with the 12th Armored Infantry, you know. And then I was, the bunch of us then were about 19, and when the war ended in Europe, they sent us all back to the States. And we were on our way back to the States when they dropped the bomb in Japan. We were on our way. I ended up with the 2nd Infantry Division in Seattle, Washington. A whole bunch of us from all the different divisions, all 19 years old. And we were going to be on the invasion that they said never was. It was going to be in March of 1946. And the 2nd Infantry would have been one of those first ones landing in that. So we were kind of glad that we didn't have to go, you know.
Let's go back to Le Havre. Tell me the process. Y'all landed. How did they disperse you? How did you find the 12th, and where were you?
Oh yeah. Well, when you hit Le Havre, then they took you to Luneville, which was right near Nancy, France. And Luneville was a replacement depot, replacing fellows from every division. All we know is that we're in these barracks and everything just overnight, and the next day we get up and they just line you up and listen for your name, and they'll say, and there was trucks lined up. It would say 45th Infantry, 3rd Infantry, 12th Armored, 3rd Armored, and so on. Because we were all infantry, you sure were going to go to an infantry division. And just about all the divisions, including the 12th, people thought, I've read into it since then in history, and we assumed that the bulge was taking place way up around Belgium and all that, and you hear so much about that. But deep down, when you investigate it, that bulge, that counterattack by the Germans went on the whole way across, and in fact, you hear so much about, and we heard so much about Herlesheim. That is where our division, and I've heard them saying, gee, we thought there was a big buildup going on, but it was hard for them to believe. And although they were warned that they thought there was a big German buildup all the way along the front, that started right there around Christmas of '44 and went right through the middle of January. And the 12th Armored took an awful beating there at Herlesheim. That's where maybe of the 800 fellows that were killed, I'll bet you, I'm guessing now, maybe over a quarter of them, almost half, might have been killed or taken prisoner of war right there. But they did a great job. And we went in there just when they were coming back from Herlesheim, you know. And I remember B-56, gee, they say that they must have either wounded or killed or lost almost half of them, because an awful lot of us went in as replacements, you know. And then they went right back into combat in Colmar, southern France, you know. And that was a big thing there. And then something that you heard about, the 12th, all of a sudden people say, what are they talking about? Mystery Division. You see it, I don't know if I have it on here, but some of them will say Mystery Division. What happened? They said that they were ready to get up to the Rhine, and General Patton was in the 3rd Army, right next to our 7th Army, and Patton wanted to be reinforced with another armored division when he get to the Rhine to go across. This is what I read later. I didn't know. All we know then is that they said, erase off everything that says 12. Anything that says 12, 12, erase it. And I know that we traveled maybe 3 days or nights, 3 nights in particular, to go leave the 7th Army. They didn't want them to know that we were weakening in the 7th and strengthening the 3rd. And then, that was March 17th. I can't forget it because I'm Irish and that was St. Patrick's Day. And we joined Patton's 3rd Army. And for the rest of March, for 2 or 3 weeks, we were with him all the way up to the Rhine. And then right there when we hit the Rhine, we went back to the 7th Army, and we went across the Rhine at Worms, W-R-M-S. I see that mentioned now and so on. And I never forget this, that we were up in the hills waiting to go across, and the bridges had been blown. The Germans had blown up all the bridges. And so the engineers started to build these pontoon bridges, you know, pontoons to go across. And they no sooner get the thing half built, and German planes would come over and blow the thing up and so on. So I remember, I wondered what happened, but I did talk one time to Colonel Field at one of these reunions and so on. And he said, well, you're one of the kids, we were kids then, he says that I was in charge of. But he said, what we decided, we would wait until it was just getting dusk, and the engineers had everything ready, and they actually built that pontoon bridge from dark, maybe 9 or 10 at night, right through to about 4 in the morning. They built that whole thing without lighting anything, which is quite interesting. They couldn't, or the Germans were on the other side, right? They got that across, and then you went across, according to Colonel Field. I said, I know this, that I remember definitely that it was just daybreak. He says, yes, we wanted to get you just over there so that you could see when you got there. And we went over there, and we went right straight ahead for a while. Maybe went so far ahead that our own artillery started to almost hit us. They made us sort of retreat a little bit to straighten the line out. But we took the big chance of going over, and you give a lot of credit to the engineers. I don't know how they did it, doing that at night. You couldn't see a thing. And I remember this. You see policemen with the phosphorus thing there. They had that on the land where we're going to go across the pontoon, you know, on the pontoon. And I remember everything's dark, can't light a cigarette or anything that I'd see here. And all they did was have these lines for our half-track driver, Ollie Voss, with me, and they had a drive the tanks and everything in between these white lines, because remember, if you went out here or there was landmines. It would blow the tank up or blow the half-track up. And so we're seeing the half-tractor going like that and going like this. And Billy Sparks is with me today. He was with me right next to me in the half-track. And we followed, and all you could see was like white lines going across, you know, and just staying between that. And we knew we were on something because you could feel ourselves going up and down like that, you know. And anyway, we got across, and then we were with back with our 7th Army, stayed with them there, and where did we go from there? Oh, I guess we went from there. I know we went up towards Stuttgart, across to Munich, and we bypassed Dachau, because a good friend of mine back in Rhode Island says, I remember American tanks going by us and not stopping, because we kept going. And I think the 45th Infantry or the 3rd Infantry also, where Audrey Murphy was in, they went into Dachau. And they said, well, we just keep going. And we were going to go into Munich, and I remember them saying that there was no Germans in there. They said Burgomaster had a white flag on it. But as we were going in, we were fired upon, and they had us turn around, and we went from there right down to Landsberg, where we ended up freeing the concentration camp. And I remember seeing the prisoners out at the gates hanging on there. We didn't know it was a concentration camp way in there. Now, they've interviewed me in Rhode Island about this, and I said, well, you know the funny thing? I says, we who were the first ones there might have seen the least, because remember, we saw these guys there, and they have a photographer and a group to get off, and we'd stop for maybe a minute or two, see these prisoners, and they'd say, mount up, let's go. The war's still going on. You don't stop for 8,000 or 10,000 guys to go in. But a day or two later, they says, you know where you were 2 or 3 days ago? You saw those prisoners out at the gates there. Those are the ones that were alive. But when they went in about a mile, they found the concentration camps. There were subsidiary camps there around Landsberg, Hurlock, and so on. So we just kept going and so on, and didn't actually see the bodies. We would have liked to, you know, because we heard all about what was there, but we just kept going, and we ended up in Innsbruck, Austria. And we were ready to go through, for I understand, the Brenner Pass to meet up with the American divisions, the 10th Mountain Division in Italy, and the war ended, so they stopped us right there, you know. So, and then, of course, all of us went back. We went back around the Danube River and so on there, which we had crossed a few weeks before. And then they just weeded out all the 19-year-olders and kept some of the old-timers, stayed there. That's why the division stayed there. 12th Army, you know, was just a division during the war. And so we went, and before you know it, we ended up in Seattle, Washington, in the 2nd Infantry Division, Big Indian Head Division. That's what we were going to be with going over to Japan when the war ended. And so I got a discharge from Seattle, Washington, Fort Lewis, out in Seattle, Washington. And the funny part was, I never heard about what happened, but I guess the men from the 12th that stayed in Europe, they organized and said, let us form an association, because this is not a regular Army division that's, you know, like the 2nd Infantry and so on. And so then I came back, went on the GI Bill to college, and it wasn't until 1956 or 8 that I first even heard about the 12th Armored. Hadn't heard anything. I got a call for this fellow Giovannini. He was one of the 18-year-olds with me, and the very first time we were in combat, he got a little excited and thought he saw, and he did see Germans in the woods near the Black Forest. He ran in, and our officer says, stay calm, don't run. He ran in like a hero or something, and a couple of minutes later he comes out without his rifle, and we see his hand half blown off. So he called me from upstate New York, and he says, you know, Goldie, they used to call me Goldie, he says, are you going to go to the reunion of the 12th Armored in New York, 1958, because there's pictures of it right here? I said, never even heard about it. Oh, yeah, he says, this is the address. So I wrote, and I got a hold of Sparky, and that was the first time that I even knew about the 12th. And then Sammy Sampson, who was wounded in my arms, you know, Sammy didn't even join our association for another 5 or 6 years. He saw a parade in Washington or something, and he saw the 12th Armored flag. He called us, and we told him about it. So it's funny that there's still people in the United States that were in the 12th that probably don't even know there's an association. this right now, what you're having right now, if it could be AP, Associated Press or something, if it could be nationwide, it might surprise you how many might want to join, even that didn't even know about it. You know, my halfback driver didn't know until only about 6 or 8 years ago we got in touch with him. So many have joined, and I think there's some still joining even now, you know. But this, to me, is a great thing they're having here, you know, particularly when you think that we are not a regular Army division, you know. But for them to do that here and in the college here, Abilene Christian, you know, to think of doing this, I think this reunion here, it's the first one I've gone to since '58. I haven't gone to any others at all. But now with this museum and that, I think you're going to an awful lot more people that ever went before, you know.
I want to take you back a little bit. In your training, were you a half-track driver, or what was your position with the company?
You mean when we actually joined the 12th? Mm-hmm. All we were, you know, the half-track was nothing more than you being infantry in the half-track to just keep up and maybe be even with the tanks or ahead of the tanks, so the whole division just mobilizes and goes. We were nothing more than infantry, because the minute we got shot at, you know, it was funny.
A rifleman or a...
Rifleman, sure.
Rifleman.
But some might be told, well, you're going to be a machine gunner or this, that, and the other. It didn't matter. But you were strictly a foot soldier. You were infantry. And as soon as we were fired on, the tanks and half-tracks would go right into the woods out of the way, and we would be on foot and move up, you know. And so you were nothing more than the infantry, just like any other infantry division, except you got there faster.
Tell me, was there somebody, or how were the replacements accepted into the companies?
You know, I thought they were great to us. I think of Sammy Sampson. I think of Ali Voss, my half-track driver. Ironically, Ali now has Alzheimer's. I'll be writing to his wife about this. Sammy Sampson's in New York. He's in a nursing home, couldn't come on. Though those guys were great to us, sure. In fact, they were glad to have some kids, guys to help out, you know. So,
did they ever give you a hard time, or did they kind of take you under your wing and say, hey, this is what to expect? And
no. I honestly said that the only time that I liked the Army, it's awful to say, might have been where I was treated as a real human being was in combat, because they were depending on you for their lives and you're depending on them. In the basic training, they've got to, much like me coaching and so on, they've got to be harsh and this, that, and the other. But once you get overseas, I think the officers, no matter who they are, in fact, most of the officers didn't want to wear their badges. They didn't want the snipers to see them. So that's what I said about Private Ryan. I said, first of all, that movie Private Ryan, the first thing is when you step off the ship overseas, you're technically a PFC. So it's Private Ryan, no such thing. And then I said, I saw, what's the name of the movie there? Hanks, was it? With this captain's thing. I said, gee, most of our officers took those off. They even got rid of the little carbine alarm. They wanted their M1. They wanted to look just like you. And I didn't want you, don't even salute me too much, because some sniper will see me saluting, they'll shoot you, you know, and so on. So I think that the camaraderie was wonderful. And those fellas that we saw, like Peischel was here, and Captain Beach, and I says, ironically, other branches of the service might say, oh boy, I'm dying to move up in rank. In the infantry, an awful lot of times they'll say, oh, I don't know if I want to be the lieutenant because he has to be the leader. Or I don't know if I want to be the sergeant. He has to be one of the leaders, and so on. So I think they were very, very human with you. And I think myself that as you went along with those fellows, you would do anything for them. And they do anything for you because they're depending on you and you're depending on them. And so I kind of liked that. I myself I've coached and had some kids go to the academies in Annapolis, and I say, I'm very proud of you, but I says, I'm not the type, I could never want to do that. But I said, during a war, infantry and so on, why, I think as you get into combat, it's a little different than the training. But they have to do that, be very strict in the training part, you know. But no, I think you're your officers in the service there, particularly in the infantry. I think it's a different breed, you know. It's maybe a dirty, rotten job, maybe, but I keep saying, well, in the end, the one who really does the job might be that finale as the infantryman, you know. So although you might hate it at first and talk about it and everything, now you say, well, I'm proud of this. And I don't know whether you ever, somebody gave me an article, it's about St. Crispin. Crispin, that has to do with England. And the gist of the thing is, going way back to the 1600s, I have a copy of that. It says something, those who did their job and went, you know, can hold their head high and say, I was part of something. I didn't shirk my duty, and so on, you know. So I think I have that poem. I should sometime send that to you. And that's what they're saying, that we in the infantry do a lot of beefing and griping and everything else, but deep down, when it's all said and done, we have pride in saying that we were infantry, whether you were a PFC, you know, or an officer. I think the officers there were just great to us, and we were great with them. And see, they might say to you the next day, well, so-and-so got killed yesterday, and now you're the sergeant, or you're this, that, and the other. And you automatically just did these things. And I think, I don't know whether you see that in other branches. I said, it's the only branch, I kid other ones that were Navy officers that I know, and this officers, this, that, and the other. I said, well, the only place, the only service that you might see where you don't want to get up in rank is in the Army, but in combat. Maybe in the Army, if there's no war going on, you might like to move up. But boy, when you're infantry, you kind of say, ooh, I don't know if I want to be that leader, you know. So they're going to say, well, you're the leader whether you like it or not. And I think you just did it. And so.
Tell me your feelings facing your first battle. You remember what that was like?
Yeah. I remember distinctly, I talked yesterday to Charlie Peischel, who was one of our officers there, great guy that's here, that's being interviewed, great guy. And I remember distinctly the very first time we were along the ditches in the road like that, and all of a sudden we're going along half tracks, and oop, the sniper fire coming from the hills, and before you know it, we jump out, we're in the ditches along the road, you know, and this officer came by, and he had a stick, long stick, and he's tapping us on our helmets saying, you kids stay, we were 18-year-olds the first time, we were petrified. They give you that stuff, it's not like the movies. I don't see anybody too brave jumping up and making, and none of those wise remarks that you hear in the movies. I said, you don't hear those wise remarks. Everybody's just petrified and quiet. And he's tapping us on the head, tapping like that, and he just kept going around the corner. And if somebody gets wounded in the infantry or killed, they'll put their body, they had like on a Jeep or something, big boards like tables. They just put their body there. If they're alive, you'll see them going by back to the medics like MASH, and you'll see the brown blanket, and you'll see the head if they're alive. But if it's over there and they've been killed. So, boy, oh boy, he says, wow, all of a sudden he comes by, blanket over the head. Now, we had been in combat about 5 minutes, if even that, you know. And I said, gee, who's that? And they said, that's Gagliardi. That was the officer that just tapped us. His name's down, you see, it's KIA. Lieutenant Gagliardi, shot right through the helmet by a sniper, you know. And I remember saying, oh, my God. That seemed so awful to us. And I remember whoever it was, the officer said, let's go. War's still going. Hey, forget it. Let's go. Let's keep going. Get that out of your mind. Let's keep moving. So then I said this. The first time I was on Colmar, we saw dead Germans, you know. And the first time you see dead Germans, that, wow, it kind of bothered you. But after a while, now, it might bother me to see a dog get killed out here. And then it's awful to say how you adjust to these things. All of a sudden you'd see different ones dead, and you just kept going. It's war, and it's awful. But I like they say, like in New York with this thing happening, you adjust to these things. And I think you just kept going and saying, well, what can we do? Just hope that you're not hit yourself, you know. So, and I never thought much that time with Sammy Sampson and the half track falling back in my arms.
Tell us that story. You told it
Yeah.
earlier to me, but we need to have it on tape.
That's an interesting story. We're going along on the half tracks, and as you came along nearer the bend of the roads, the Germans sometimes would either have civilians even. They'd say none, but they were, or soldiers, throwing mortars down on you, or shooting 88s, the German 88s, you know, down on you. They know you had to slow down the whole half-track column, the tanks and half-track. And so we're going along like that, and Sammy Sampson, who was there before, he had been wounded at Hurlesheim. He's a couple of years older than us. He's looking out over the side of the half-track. I'm on the other side like this, and all of a sudden, bang, it seems to me that it must have been, he said it was an 88 later on, and all of a sudden, bang, shrapnel comes up, hits him in the chest, and he comes flying back in my arms, and then there's other stuff landing here, there, and a little turmoil. Everybody jumps off the half tracks quickly. I remember going into a barn with him there, and I'm looking there, and I says, let me see, and I could see little holes here and there, a little blood. But I didn't realize later, when he came back to us 2 weeks later, from 2 or 3 weeks later, he had about 4 pieces of shrapnel that high that went within a ½ inch of his heart, you know, big piece like that. Well, anyway, I'm talking to him like that, and I'm hollering to the medic. The medic says, how is he? I said, well, he's all right. He says, well, I'm taking care of a guy. Stay with him there, you know. I'll be over to him. And anyway, if you go back, to the rear, to like at MASH, you know, they have a hospital, like Dr. Phibbs was the big one with us, PHIBBS, yeah, wrote the book, The Other Side of Time. He would be back there, maybe in the rear there with the medics and all that, and take care of wounds or this, that, and the other, whatever they could do. And anyway, but when you went back, if you had a bad wound, you might be sent back to the States or to something else where you went in combat. So you wanted to take any of your valuables. So Sammy said to me, Goldie called me, will you go out and get my, each of us had a little bag with our stuff in it, souvenirs or anything that you're buying, so personal stuff. So I said, okay. So I just started going out, and this Woody Woodard, who I showed you the picture of, Woody Woodard was a sergeant with us, and he said, Goldie, stay there with him to point him out to the medic. And he said, I'll go out and get his thing. I know where it is. So he ran out, jumped up on the half-track, I guess, which is not more than 25 yards away or so. And all of a sudden I hear another bang where they must have thrown some more 88s mortars. And all of a sudden Woody comes running into us, holding his shoulder. And my God, his whole shoulder was blown off where the thing landed, I guess, right in the half-track around there. Anyway, his shoulder went pretty much all raw and so on. So now he gets sent back, and one of the articles I showed you, that guy by the name of Himmel, wrote to me later on and said to me, you know, he said, that time that you were going to go out, he says, I was out there, he says, and I helped him get off the half-track when I brought him back into where you were, but he says he lost his shoulder. And since then, we've talked to that Woody Woodard. I've talked to him out in the West. He's never joined the group here. You know, he says, yeah, he says, I got a discharge from that, quite bad, you know. And so that was quite interesting, how close it came. If the thing, I never thought of it, if it landed 3 feet this side in the middle of the half-track, it might have, more than likely, when Woody got hurt, though, it must have landed outside of the, I don't know, because we must have mounted up and gone again in the half-track, so it couldn't have landed in the middle of the half-track. Now, I'll have to investigate that and find out where that did land, you know. All I know is that he lost his shoulder, you know, and so on. And that, I'm saying, that would have been me, had I, you know. So anyway. So I think a lot of times surviving that is luck, much like the thing we're hearing of the terrorism in New York now, a little bit of luck, you know, of things that happen, you know. So, but anyway, I'm glad that they, it's awful to say, but we says, thank God for Harry Truman and the bomb, because that indirectly saved an awful lot of us, but saved an awful lot of Japanese people too, you know. So.
Tell me about Colmar, your experiences in Colmar.
Yeah, Colmar was the last pocket of resistance for the Germans, and they kept a big group there. They wanted to stay there so they get behind the American lines and so on, you know. And that was I found out later the Statue of Liberty that was given to us by France, the man who designed that with an Italian name, if you look that up, you'd find that. He was from Colmar, and they said that the statue of him that they had there in the square and it was knocked down with the American groups going in there, you know. And ironically, they kid all the time. They say it was one of our tankers or half-track drivers that must have shot guns there and knocked the thing down, you know. Then I know they had a big Army Day parade there, and I think de Gaulle was there and so on at the Army Day parade. We weren't there. It's funny when you talk to people, you say all the time that they'll have groups stay there to talk to somebody, but most would mount up and go. The war's still going on, so you just kept moving, you know. So anyway, but I've often said there's always something good of things that happen in life. And I said, well, that was for us, and I talked to some fellows here, it might have been one of the biggest opportunities for an awful lot of us that were PFCs. Who was I talking? Frank Bondollar. He writes for a newspaper now, Keene, New Hampshire. He says, you know, he says, I went on the GI Bill and so on. He says, you know, when you think of it, he says, how many of us before World War II had the money to go to college? It just didn't. It was usually people from money whose kids went. I grew up in the poor area of Providence, inner city, you know. Irish immigrant, it was Irish immigrant, Jewish immigrant, French immigrant, Italian, everything. But do you know, after the war, at least we had a high school diploma, and a whole bunch of us took advantage of it. And I said, whoever started that GI Bill, I don't know who it was, did a great favor, because 3 or 4 million took advantage of it. And I remember in college, I had a lady instructor who had retired as a professor in a college. She went back, she said, I'm writing a book, and I volunteered to come back, which is interesting. She says, how many people in their lifetime will ever have a war that you could write about? She says, I am writing a book. I've come back and I volunteered to teach at this college because I knew it was all veterans. It was, where I was phys ed major, you know. And she says, Little Isle College in Connecticut. And she says, I decided that I'd like to have the honor of teaching you fellows who are veterans. And she would make each one of us get up and relate where we were. We had one fellow with me that was on the death march in the Philippines, you know, and a lot were prisoners, and some of the fellows were 30 years old, and we kidded about it because 3 of the instructors, women instructors, just out of college teaching dance, this and the other, ended up marrying some of the students. That's unusual. We had 3 of them like that. The students were 30 years old, teachers were maybe 25, you know. So that was, so I say that was a thing that changed your whole life, you know, and I think it changed the life of an awful lot of us. We just said, well, let's see what we can do, and so on, you know. Now, I think any youngster that's ambitious can almost work his way through school and so on. And I think people talk to me about the success that I had at coaching. And I said, well, you know, I used to coach swimming. They asked me to coach that, and before you know, I had some winning teams. But I used to think nothing of it. I said, oh, no, if we want to do well, we have to do this 7 days a week. People said, oh, 7 days a week. I said, oh, that's nothing. You do that in the service and so on. So I think a lot of your military carries over, and I said, nah, we can do this, we can do that. And a lot of the kids said, we thought we were in the military, but maybe today it might be nice for us to reenact the draft floor. Maybe that sounds awful. But I say that when we look back, and I ended up in teaching and coaching, and indirectly I met my wife, Judy. She wouldn't have bothered with me if I wasn't a college graduate, I think, you know. And so that's where I met her, at a college dance and so on, you know. But
tell me, who do you, who is a person or 2 or 3 people that stand out in your war experience that you really hold in high esteem? You really respect them for what they did for you, or your observations of their leadership?
yeah, it might be the one that would be, is it Captain Beach? Yeah. Charlie Peichel here. Yeah. Never met him till the other day, you know. I said, you're one of our officers, you know. But those guys we looked up to, Beach and him, and then right down, they were in charge of numbers of the groups there. But the ones you really knew, sounds kind of crazy, but the ones you really knew were the 6 or 8 right in your own little half-track. That was like your own little group, you know.
Tell me about the guys that stand out in your mind, characteristics,
Well,
how they do.
yeah. Well, Billy Sparks right here, you know, is with us today in the wheelchair, you know. I remember Billy, one of the first times we were in combat, we were out wide open, and geez, they had us digging foxholes, you know. Before you know it, Sparky comes jumping over and jumping into my place. I says, get the hell out of here. I says, gee, better that one of us gets killed, not two. So I said, let's take our chances. You get back over there, and I'm staying here. And he kids me about it even today, you know. So we had a funny incident happen that maybe the officers would say you should be court-martialed for that, and things that would happen. Sparky was with me. We were like, we'd stop in the half-tracks and this, that, and the other. I remember we were right near a river where you would go across and so on, and our job was to make sure that you didn't see any Germans coming back this way. So they might send you down there for the night in a barn or a farmhouse or anything as the Germans were retreating there, you know, and they'd give you a little walkie-talkie phone or something like that. So Billy was with me, I remember. I said, well, Billy, because he'll tell a different story. They had him in here. But I said, now, Billy, look, we're falling asleep. You know, we're going to be here all night. So he said, so it was the winter, kind of cold. We get inside of a house, the place was empty, you know. But I said, Billy, you just sit down there and lay down there, and I'll wake you up. And then I said, you take my place. I'll sleep. Otherwise, we're going to both fall asleep. So I'm standing there with my rifle, and I'm looking. I said, before you know it, I knelt down. Before you know it, I put my chin on the windowsill with my rifle like this, you know, and my big helmet, you know. And all of a sudden, because Billy Sparks, if you know, I'm a very nervous guy, all of a sudden, I hear, Goldie! Goldie! Damn you! He's punching me. You fell asleep! I says, Billy, no. I said, I just was resting. You weren't right. You were sleeping. So to this day, I said, Billy, no, I really was. I think I fell asleep, you know. So then, because he took my place, and I made sure he didn't kneel down, I made him stay standing up, you know. So we have another one that the officers wouldn't know that I told about. We had a guy from New Britain, Connecticut, Russell Turgeon. I was going to try to get a hold of him. He's not in the association, but I've talked to him. Russell Turgeon another time was sent with me. They talk about guard duty. Guards in the States, you might be on guard duty for an hour or two. Here they just say, stay there till we get you. Usually at night you're sent here, there. He was sent with me the same way. Little walkie-talkie, they send guys this way and that. Never forget it, because this is the funniest story. It's really not funny, but we go into little French towns, and the officers would tell you, now look, they're all going to come out giving you wine and everything because you're freeing them, you know, first time. And we, the French people give you a bottle of wine and say, well, let them drink it first. How do you know they might be poisoning you? They just don't. So Turgeon, this Turgeon was a big drinker, drank the whole bottle, and he was really drunk. And all of a sudden they, Goldie, you and Turgeon down to so-and-so, take the walkie-talkie. Now he's half-gassed. I don't want to squeal on him, or he'll be caught, he'll be in trouble. So what happened, down we go, which was maybe 500 yards down to the river there, farmhouse, you know. Always the same situation where you'd be there at night with half-tracks. They didn't want to keep going at night, stop, you know. And anyway, guys, I'm saying, Turgeon, just shut up, keep quiet. On the other side of the river, Germans there, you know, they had retreated. There was a bridge there. They didn't want to let any of the Germans come back this way, but they didn't want to blow the bridge out because we're going to use it ourselves the next day. So make sure none of them, you know, if you see any of them coming, you call us on this little talkie thing, you know. And anyway, he's feeling no pain. He goes to light a cigarette. I said, don't you dare light a match near me. I said, they'll be shooting, you know. So I'm trying to shut him up, and I don't want to get him in trouble. Anyway, he leaves his rifle down, and he says, I'm going back up to where the guys were, 500 yards up. They were in a farmhouse, you know. They always have a tanker or a half-track. Tanker is up on the top, and they have flares, something they'll shoot a flare over. It's just like daylight, you know. Anyway, he takes off, leaves his rifle. First of all, he's drunk. He should have been court-martialed. Now he can't go to jail now. And then he leaves his rifle. That's twice he should be caught. Huh? Walks up. I said, I guess he'll come back, but nope. Keeps going. All of a sudden, I hear bang, bang, bang. I hear all kinds. Then I hear German voices. You know, I'm listening. I'm like this. I'm petrified. I'm no hero. I'm petrified with my rifle. I said, oh, God. German voices. I hear, oh, comrade, oh. I look, it's daylight. They shot up flares. Now I'm down there for the next 3 hours until daybreak. Daybreak, they call me on a little thing. Come up, you know, up I come. I go in to the guy, says, to the guys with me, to Billy Sparks and them. I says, what happened? They says, you tell us. He says, Turgeon. They says, he walked up and walked right into about 8 Germans. They said they were out of the town. They thought but they had been hiding, and they were trying to get down that road to go over that bridge. They would have run into us. He walks into them. They shoot him right through the belly. He didn't die, though. And our guys, as soon as they hear the shots from the Germans, they come out of the things. They kill 1 or 2 of the Germans and capture the other 6. Because when I got up, there's 6 Germans in there. They got them huddled together, prisoners. 2 are dead. And anyway, I said, well, what happened to Turgeon? They says, they sent him back to the hospital. He got wounded. He got shot through the belly. I says, Don, he says, couldn't find. I said, his rifle's down there. I says, I just leave it there. So we took off. Now, never heard from Turgeon again till after the war. I end up in the Army and college, and I'm running track for Arnold College in Connecticut against New Britain teachers, where he lived in New Britain. So in between events, I said, gee, I got the little book with names on it. I said, I'll call it. So I call up Turgeon. He says, yes, this is Russ Turgeon. I says, Russell, what are you doing? I says, I'm over. He says, I'll be right over. Over he came. That's the last I've seen him. I haven't talked to him since. Over he comes, pulls up his shirt, and there's a great big scar. He says, I got shot right to, I says, yeah, I heard all about it. I said, what? I said, well, they sent, I got a discharge. They sent me home. I said, oh, my God. So I says, boy, I says, I should tell, he says, don't say a word around here, because he says, I'm the hero here in New Britain. He says, they've had parades where I'm the Purple Heart leading the parade as the marshal and so on. I said, oh, my God. I said, by all rights, you should be in jail. So we laugh about that, you know. But can you imagine the things that happen? And that's something that really wasn't funny, but it was funny, you know. So anyway. But anyway, it's funny because Billy said to me, have you been? I said, no, I should call him again, try to get in touch with him, you know. So, but anyway, he was a goof with us there on the half-track. So, but you have a lot of incidents that happen. I told Peischel, he laughed, he says, you 18-year-olds are a little wacky. They'd give you, we call it Cracker-Jack boxes. They might throw you 3 of them. You're going to have that for the day, you know, eat the Cracker-Jack boxes and so on, you know. And Judy laughed, my wife laughed. She says, I heard you. I says, oh, yeah, we get sick of that stuff. So we might go in a farmhouse and grab eggs and take our helmets and boil the damn eggs hard, and we'd have them in our pockets. We've eaten hard-boiled eggs and cut up onions or something like that, you know. So, yeah. But this day, then when you did get back, now that was in combat, but when you get back from the lines, they gave you sea rations, which in the Navy, they'd think that was great. And we'd say, well, these were cans of beans or stuff like that, but cold. So I said, gee, how can we heat these darn things? So we get the bright idea. I says, Billy, that you see in the wheelchair, I said, Billy, that was your, no, he says, your idea. I said, no, it was yours. We went and we wired the can of beans to the motor of the half-track. And we said, well, when he gets the thing, we says, start the motor up. So he, you know, so we didn't tell him it was inside there. All of a sudden we hear, boom, the can of beans blew up. And Ollie Voss, the poor guy, his picture I gave you there, Ollie Voss opened the thing and saw beans. He says, which one of the 18-year-olds did this? He says, you should be shot. I pointed to Billy, and he pointed to me. So I don't think I did it, you know. But anyway, there were the beans all over the motor, and he had to clean it, you know. So when I called him, when we got in touch with Sammy Sampson a few years ago, Sammy says, gee, what about Ollie Voss? What about this? And I said, well, you know, I wrote to the division and said, can you give me the addresses of when they were down here at Camp Barkley? You know? And they gave me the address of Ollie Voss and the address of Woody Woodard, you know? And so we got a hold of those. And when I called Voss, he lives in Cary, Illinois. I'll be sending this stuff to his wife, you know, because the poor guy's got Alzheimer's, imagine. And when I called, his wife answered, and I says, you tell her that this is Eddie Golden, that was a friend of Bill Sparks, who wired the beans to your motor. He got on the phone, and he says, am I hearing things? Is this Eddie Golden? Let me sit down. He says, I can't believe it. He says, I have not heard from anybody since 1944. This was 1968 or 70 or something, you know. He said, my God, so he couldn't believe it. Since then, we've written back and forth to him, you know, and he's forgiven us for doing that with the, but isn't that something, can you imagine? It's the craziest things you do, though, you know. Pyshal says, oh, yes, I remember us figuring some ways of heating, you know. I remember we were in after the war, I think, in Germany there, and they had water spouts on the edge of the house to catch the water, you know. And they had great big pans like that I think they used to have the animals eat out of and all that, you know. So we got smart and we filled those with water because there's no running water in the house or anything. And we decided that we heated that, and I should have gotten a picture of that. And we got in and took a bath in that, you know, thing from the water, you know. So.
When you think about your war's experiences, is there a, you know, sometimes we have pictures or moments that just sort of like are a photograph in our minds. Do you have any moments that are like that, when you just sit and think that that's exactly what your thoughts go to, is that one memory, that one picture?
You mean like a dream?
A dream or experience?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think this, though. When they talk about the, what's the name's book there, The Greatest Generation, and somebody said to me, gee, we didn't hear about all this World War II and so on. I said, well, you know what? Everybody came back, and everybody went about their business, either getting married or working or going to college, and kept going and going and going. And I says, and until 10 years ago about, that's when everybody started to retire. And now, after you retired, it's the first time that maybe I went back, stuff that I gave you, that stuff's been in, she knows, right, in the drawer there for all these years. I never looked at the darn stuff. Now that you retire, I said, well, now I got time to maybe look through all this, you know. So you start looking through it before my wife, who's sitting here watching, before she throws it all out, you know. She's threatened to throw all of this out, you know. So anyway, yeah. But anyway, I'm kind of glad that I saved some of this for this museum now, you know. And so, yeah, yeah.
Tell me what you learned about yourself, being an 18-year-old going to war in Europe.
Well, you know, I think Frank. We talked last night. Frank Bondala, was it? What's his name? Frank Bondala.
Bondala.
Yeah, he and I got talking about it, and Pyshal too. He says, you know, we all came back and went to college. We were all, I was 20, 21. They were maybe 25, 26. And I remember I said, oh, gee, this is kid stuff. We don't want fraternities for sororities. That's a bunch of kid stuff, you know. We were very, Pyshal said, it might be in his interview, he says, you know, up to that time you're in high school and you didn't question your teachers or anything else. Now he says, we've been out in the world, we've been here, there, we've been through a war. All of a sudden he says, not being wise or anything, but he says, I started to question everything and say to the person, well, what do you think about this and what do you think? You know? So he says, I think you all of a sudden had matured, you had changed. I know this. I came home and I did have a German Luger, which I don't have any longer. I gave it to my janitor school. And I had which I shouldn't have had, ammunition and so on. And I never forget it because when I came home, my brother and I, 2 years older than me, before we went away in the service, oh my God, we'd be fighting and arguing and always arguing and fighting and this, that, and the other. My mother said, oh boy, here they are back from the service. Now I was 21, my brother was 23 or 4. And she said, oh brother, here they're going to start out. And she said, all of a sudden I looked and you both sat down and started talking like real human beings. She says, so I said, wow, they've changed. And I think that was happening all over the country maybe. Everybody, you had changed, you know. And I guess you had changed, your outlook. I know they had me, right, when I got my master's degree in college, they had different things you could write on, And I said, gee, I says, could I write on something that was more familiar to me, like World War II? Could I write about Eisenhower or something? He says, yeah, if you want to, go ahead. And so I did, and so on. It just showed how you changed. I think your whole outlook changed. And I think what I said to you, going back to why do we have the summers off in school, it's because in the old days it was for the kids to work on the farms and help out and this, that, and the other. Now in your whole country, including here, I'll bet, 90% of your kids in the summertime are just horsing around doing much of nothing, not really doing that much to help out or anything else, And the fellow who taught with me was in the Korean War infantry, and he said the same thing. He said, it might be a good idea for us to at least every summer for 2 or 3 months have high school boys in the military. A lot of patriotism and everything else, but maybe let them rough it a little bit, and it might be good for them, good for our country. And I think of some professors that I've met, because I play a lot of tennis still, and so I play a lot of professors. And one I know from the University of Rhode Island, from Switzerland. We got talking. He said, "Oh yes," he says, "Oh absolutely, we have to put our 2 years in the Army," and he says, "And I think it's good for us." He says, "And then we're on for the next 10 years. We're on like National Guard here," and he says, "I think that 2 years really matures you to do this, that, and the other." And I really think that here in our country, that maybe we need this, We just had that incident, and it must be all around. The University of Rhode Island just had a lot of incidents where the students living off campus raising heck in the community, this, that, and the other. And somebody in the newspaper said, gee, imagine with this terrorism thing going on, and they're still so immature to be demolishing or wrecking houses, and they're in college, you would think, Because I said, you've got to be really strict with them. You have to either, the colleges say, oh, they're not living in the college dorms, so we have no rights over them. I said, well, you know what? Maybe the colleges, or they say, well, you are something. I says, I might say the colleges should be made to have dorms, and all students should be on the dorms. I said, you know where they don't have that trouble? At Annapolis or West Point. Not too many of them live off campus. They don't. They says, that's right. I says, there's no trouble. I says, maybe they either that, or I says, if you say it's an outside deal, we have no jurisdiction because they're not on our campus, Then I says, maybe the law enforcement, sounds awful, stick them in jail for 3 months. Let them lose a year of college. And they'll soon shape up. Oh, they said, that's not democratic. I said, well, I don't know. Sometimes I think the little, some of the kids that swam for me says, gee, when we had you, we thought we were in the military, And I said, well, this is it. 7 days a week, not too much. That's nothing. You're not going to get killed. It's good for you. I said, besides, in the end, and over the years, I think I must have had, I'm guessing now, or if I know, maybe 60 or 80 of my kids went full rides to colleges all over the country. I had a whole file on all of them. I said, if you stay with me, I will guarantee I'll help you as much as I can for college, and so on. And I think that was a little, and now that, we just had a reunion. I have a reunion every year. And they come back and they say, boy, were we glad that you were so strict. Not mean, but strict, Yeah.
Was your family, were you raised very strictly?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You were back to my parents.
Yeah, I was asking about the strictness. So the Army was not something that was real different for you.
And I think from, again, going back to Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, I think we were Depression kids. And I remember myself being up at 5:30 in the morning. I did paper routes in the morning, Didn't play in high school at all, played in junior high, then didn't play in high school, worked the whole time while in high school, and then played at college, And I think a lot of kids did that. And it was Depression years, and you just could not get a job. You were lucky to get a paper route to do this, that, and the other, But I think all of us had great parents. And that, to me, was the thing that's stood out the most with me. And we were not, people thought, I see kids now with so much. I said, oh my gosh, they're giving them card, giving them this, that, and the other. I said, nah. And I said, they don't appreciate all that. You know, better that they go out, do a little bit of working and so on, you know, and I think we'd be better off, you know. And we just, we're talking about terrorism now, because I read all the articles in the paper. And if you read even yesterday's papers, they were talking about why some of the people in the world do not like our American people, because they met some of our youth, and they say there are an awful lot of spoiled youngsters, and they have so much, and so on, you know. And we have to look at it that maybe they don't like some of the things that we do, too, you know, and so on. So, but I think...
oh, I'm sorry. As you look back over your war experiences, and this tape is going to be kept in the museum, and people will look at it as education thing. I always like to ask this question before we end. What message would you like to leave for people who see this as a veteran of World War II?
Well, I don't know what I'd like to say. We went to a session the other night before we left at the University of Rhode Island on terrorism, and talking about rights of youngsters and this, that, and the other, you know. And I happened to say to the vice president of the college, they were saying, oh, should we go checking on all these students of different nationalities, you know, and Muslim and this, that, and the other. One of the professors was Muslim himself. And I talked to the vice president after. I said, you know something, we talk about righteousness and all that, but I said, you know, I maybe learned a lesson. I says, 3 of the boys that I had swimming for and went to Annapolis, and their senior year in Annapolis, the FBI used to come in and question me all about them, everything I knew about them, about their parents. Did they ever seem as if they'd have something to do against the government and this, that, and the other? I said, you know, in our country, gee, I says, we did our job for our country, and I says, gee, I should think that you should be able to question every student, and then if he has nothing to hold back, he should be able to come out with something. And if he has something, he's guilty of something, why, that should be found out too. Not just interview. I said, maybe interview every student if you want to, and so on. And I said, they said, they interviewed 4 professors. And I'm thinking back myself from World War II. And 3 of the professors, well, we should not do a thing about all this terrorism thing. We should just, as the president today is sending over money for food and everything, that's all well and good. But one professor says, I'm all for the things Bush is doing. We're not just we're going to go at random and bomb or do this, that, and the other. But he says, you know, it comes to a certain point, and he's a history professor, where he says, I think had we not been such appeasers in World War II, we would not have lost 12 or 15 million, you know, people, and soldiers and everything else. He says, had we done something to stop Hitler way, way back, then maybe we would have avoided that big war. And he said, now, I think we should still pursue this and try our best to do what we can for to settle all this thing peacefully. But he says, you know, it comes to a certain point where force seems to be the only thing left. And he says, I say it might be force in a certain place and so on that might settle this whole thing. We don't want to have to do it, but we might. I think myself then being in the service, it's, as Peichel said yesterday in Frank Bradstreet when we were talking last night in here, I think now I have a different outlook on things, maybe a more mature outlook on the whole world situation. I think being in the military, even if the kids went in for 2 years with the military, let them mature a little bit. And maybe that's, I've said to myself, gee, I certainly, through the Army, then letting me go to college, then my whole outlook changed. I was even kidding about this. Can you imagine, before I went away in the service, I want to read the funny papers. Now I don't read the funny papers. I now read the editorial page of the newspaper. I read it of your paper the other day and so on. I says, can you imagine how I've changed? And maybe a lot of it has to do with my background from the service. And I think this, maybe we learn a lesson where we say, well, God bless America, but by gosh, I even said to a World War II veteran the other day, I said, you know something? He said to me, well, you know, Eddie, you're right. He said, we're all retired now. Our families are grown up. And maybe we could not just say, hold the flag up and this, that, and the other. I said, yeah, I'd be willing if I've got my health, I have, luckily. But I said, an awful lot from World War II. I'd be willing, and I think it's because of my background in World War II, to go back into the service. And remember, there's an awful lot of jobs, if these guys go over there, that can be done behind the lines, whether it's driving trucks, doing anything with the guys. Almost all the way to combat if we had to help out. But I think an awful lot of us might surprise you and could still go and do a good job of helping out, you know, and back up the young kids, you know, and I think maybe that all comes back to my background from the Army and so on, you know. And I think the article that was in the Army paper, I did say that. I says, can you imagine how it took a war to change our lives into a profession of education and teaching and this, that, and the other, you know? And then somebody said to me, gee, how come you'll read that article about me, how come you went to such a bother of writing? I had at one time, I had a list of 350 colleges in the United States that had swimming teams, and I had them all listed about what the requirements were to get in, all the way down to here, you know, the University of Maryland, this, that, and the other one. And I said, well, I feel as though the Army gave me a chance through college to do something, and now I'm going to make sure that I'll try my best to help each kid some way or other. And it goes back to my background of having nothing. And I think then you say, gee, I do. I say I like to help. They said to me in school,